National Chief, thanks for being with us. You've spent the last few months really crisscrossing the country, meeting with nations on this $47.8 billion package to reform child and family services. What have you been hearing out there?
Certainly, look, it's been a whirlwind. It's been busy. I know late night flights, early mornings, and it's to visit with and talk to our people about probably one of the most important discussions that we'll ever have, and it's on our children. And it's always really fueled with passion right across the country. I think that it's a long overdue discussion that First Nations haven't had. And I know, as certainly the first mother to be a national chief, that it's one of the most important discussions that I think that I'll ever have, that we'll ever have in certainly my career in politics. And I hope that we try and get this right in a good way. And I know that it's always sensitive because it's about our kids and our kids on First Nations communities that continue to get taken away, taken off reserve, away from our language, away from our culture. And we've been hearing that from coast to coast to coast from First Nations. I want to thank First Nations communities from across this country who have invited me into their homes, into their communities, as we've had these really tough discussions. At the same time, I think there's a lot of support out there for this agreement to move ahead. Of course, people always want amendments, right? It's a huge agreement. It's many pages long, and we worked on those amendments. And thankfully, I can report today that what we've heard from chiefs in the past few months, we've changed in the agreement. We have a revised agreement this morning. Things like to make sure that there's regional representation now from across the country, making sure that every region has a voice at that table as we roll this out for the years ahead. And I think that that's a good thing. We've heard chiefs, and of course other, making sure that First Nations are better defined in the agreement, and the liability piece, like there's just so many pieces at this. So we made sure that we fix those so that chiefs are well informed for next week, and to make sure that they feel comfortable enough to proceed with this program piece. At the same time, I know that this is a floor. The $47.8 billion is a floor. It's a program, First Nations Child and Family Services program. And I know that we're switching a lot of these investments away from the provinces and organizations directly to First Nations. And I know that that's a big change from the way that things have normally been done. And I know that it's hard for entities, governments, this country to maybe move away and move towards a more First Nations-led approach. But First Nations are capable. They're not the ones that created this mess. Ever since governments have been in control of First Nations children and First Nations child and family services matters, that's where we went wrong. Prior to that, First Nations, since time immemorial, have kept their children well, healthy, balanced with the land, with our language, waters, clean waters at that point. And it's only been since the time of residential schools, day schools, the 60s scoop, that we've seen the horrific assault on First Nations women and children through the child welfare system. And they're very intrusive, and they target us as mothers, and they target our children. And that has to stop in this country. I know that it's not an easy discussion at all. And everybody, I'm so thankful that for the first time in the history of this country, that we're having this hard conversation. And I'm glad for the passion that I've been hearing. And I'm glad for the amendments that have happened. And I know that I look forward to the discussion next week and getting, of course, direction from chiefs in assembly on will they accept the $47.8 billion, or will they maybe want to go a different route. But at the end of the day, it's our communities know best, and we leave this up to our communities to decide.
National Chief, next week there are resolutions to accept the package from the federal government, but others that would delay the vote, outright reject it, or one calling to renegotiate it. What do you think is going to happen?
Look, I think that there's a move to certainly move forward. I believe in the chiefs. I believe in First Nations, that we're going to do the right thing. And I look forward to this discussion. We welcome, of course, APTN to join us there. You'll see, it'll be a real, you're going to hear hurt people as well that have been hurt through that system. Unfortunately, as we've seen through the 23 billion compensation deal that we finished just a few months ago, we estimate that 300,000 First Nations people, like children within that system, and then of course, all the different classes, including parents, that's 300,000 directly affected. So that means every single family has been affected by the child welfare system. And so we're going to hear passion speeches. We're going to hear, we're going to have a big discussion about this. And I'm so optimistic and I'm thankful that we're coming together in a good way. And I think that, of course, we'll make sure that if need be, that we'll have time in the evenings to work through resolutions if they need to be reworked to get to that place where we get to a good place where we're trying to move forward. But certainly you never hear that status quo is good enough. First Nations want to move in a different direction when it comes to child and family services. It's just too intrusive on our people. And we know, and our leaders know, that something needs to be done differently, because what we have right now and the system that we have right now is not working.
National Chief, what would be your concerns if this package is delayed or scrapped altogether?
I think I worry that the money doesn't get booked in Parliament, and I worry that we lose out on post-majority, for instance. Right now, the program's designed for when you're 18 years old and you're say you turn 18 and you're a kid in care. Well, the next morning, the day after your 18th birthday, you enter extreme poverty. Mm-hmm. So I think with this new, final settlement agreement on child and family services, certainly it gives, us some leverage in First Nations. It gives kids post-majority supports up to age 26. And we give those kids a little bit of a hand up so that they don't enter poverty the day after their 18th birthday. And maybe this gives them some tools, and it's not perfect. I get it. I mean, I wish we could push that date even further, but of course, such as our negotiations, they're not always easy. But at the same time, we give these young people a chance to grow more, to thrive, and to find their way within society. Because right now we're creating broken people. And, so absolutely, like there's so much. And I think the other thing is, of course, the band rep program would be ripped apart. And I want to commend the Ontario First Nations. I know people can say that they've had probably the upper hand in this, and certainly they've been representatives as part of this. They've applied for intervener status many years ago on that. But I think that their 65 agreement included band rep support services across Ontario. The rest of the country doesn't have that. And so this agreement will extend to all those First Nations across the country to make sure that they have a rep from each First Nation when kids are in court or there's family matters, that we're not pushing children off reserve, or that we're not putting them in non-First Nations homes. So I know that there's lots of good things in this agreement. And of course, as you know, it's not a perfect agreement as well, right? We wish that it included, off reserve, for instance. And so big conversations. And certainly, of course, this doesn't take into account the provinces of this country that need to be held to account for their part in the racism in child welfare in this country. We can't let them off the hook.
National Chief, we'll have to leave it there, but of course we'll all be watching next week in Calgary. Thanks for taking some time.
Miigwech. Thank you.